Okay, Chair, when you're ready, you're now live on YouTube. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Good evening and welcome to East Devon District Council's virtual LED monitoring forum on the 25th of January 2022. I am your chair, Councillor Sam Hawkins, and I'd like to welcome anyone to the meeting who is watching it via the live streaming. Based on a decision of Council, we will continue to hold virtual meetings until the 11th of May 2022. And I'd like to remind both members and public attending or watching that the Council has delegated much of its decision making to our senior officers. May I remind members that the Code of Conduct applies throughout this meeting, and we reserve the right to remove and disconnect any participant who is disrupting the meeting by whatever means. Please turn any telephone devices off or onto silent. And in the event of a break in an internet connection, please bear with us as we try to reconnect after 15 minutes. If we are not able to reconnect, we will consider the meeting adjourned and reconvene at a later date. If you wish to comment, please raise your electronic hand and wait to be called. And I'll hand over to Debbie for an electronic roll call, please.
Thank you, Chair. Let's start with you, please. Councillor Hawkins.
I am here, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Miller.
Present, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Arnott, please.
Present, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dent.
Present, thank you, Debbie.
Thank you. Councillor Brewster Sarum.
Present, thank you, Debbie.
Thank you. Councillor Hookway.
Present, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Loudon, I don't see. Councillor Young, I don't see. Councillor Pook, please.
Yes. Okay, Debbie.
Thank you. And that's it with what I've got before me. Thanks, Chair. You'll definitely call it this evening.
Thank you. Agenda item 1, public speaking. There are no members of the public registered to speak. So agenda item 2, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 23rd of November 2021. If there are any members with any comments on the minutes, please raise your electronic hand. If there are no issues, I'll assume you're content to go on. Councillor Dent, please.
Very simply, I carefully gave my apologies because I knew I'd be away, and I'm not included as an apologising councillor.
Shocking.
Shocking, absolutely.
Debbie, you're right to make the minor amendment, and I assume we're happy to proceed on that basis.
Yes, of course, Chair. Yep,
Lovely.
I'll sort that out, Chair. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Agenda item 3, apologies. Debbie, I know we've got a few, so I'll hand it to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I have apologies from Councillors Hayward and Councillor Rowland, who are on the forum, and also from Councillor Steve Gazzard, who's not a member of the forum but wanted to pass that on. Does anyone else have any apologies from any other members of the forum, please? I'll take that as a note. Okay, Chair, back to you.
Thank you. Agenda item 4, declarations of interest. To help Debbie out, I think if we start with those who are a member of LED, if you can do a green tick or put your hand up, I'm aware that that's the main one. I think that's just Councillor Dent and Miller. And then if anybody has any other declarations they wish to declare, if they can put their hand up and we'll go through it in the traditional way, so to speak.
Sorry, Chair, I forgot. Same as Councillor Dent and Councillor Miller, member of
Thank
LED.
you.
Thank you.
Okay. So, Chair, I've got that from Councillor Arnott, and I'm assuming, Councillor Arnott, that's for all our items on the agenda this evening.
And then Councillor Miller, is that another declaration, or is it still the LED member?
It's the same as I presume Councillor Dent was going to declare the same thing. Paid up member of LED, basically, yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Thanks. Debbie, you've got those 3, haven't you?
And for Alan. Yep, that's great. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. As now the hands move on to the next item, which is item 5, matters of urgency. There are no matters of urgency. Agenda item 6, confidential exempt items, and there is one item which officers recommend will be dealt with this way, listed as agenda item 11. Agenda item 7 is the update on leisure strategy. That's over to strategic leisure with a verbal update from Liz, please.
Thank you, Chair. Feels like a long time since I was been talking to this group. I apologise for missing the last meeting. I think my colleague Rachel stepped into the fold, took over, but it's good to meet you all again. Quite a lot of work has been undertaken since we last met, and I've just done a few bullet points. I don't know, Debbie, if you can put these up on the screen, and I'll just talk
I'll do that now.
to them.
Bear with me a second. No, sorry, let me get the right one up. Okay, here we go.
I think it's just the second sheet, Debbie.
There we go. Can everyone see that okay?
Yes, I really did this as a bit of a prompt, and in case you couldn't hear me very well during the meeting. But I thought I'd begin with talking about site audits. So one of our first tasks with the leisure strategy was to undertake an audit of all the indoor sports facilities that are included within the scope of works for the leisure strategy. And in addition to those, we also included the artificial turf pitches, essentially because the majority of those are located adjacent to the indoor leisure facility provision within the district. So we've covered those off as well. And we plan to share the information on the artificial turf pitches with East Devon's planning team, who are undertaking the playing pitch strategy, and it will help inform that document. So the audited sites were taken from a Sport England database. It's called the Active Power database, and it's quite a lengthy document, and we've visited all the facilities on that database, and there were some that were not included on the database. For example, more recent facilities that have just popped up, such as the Oliver Joseph gyms in the district, which are relatively new. And when we have that situation, we do inform Sport England of any changes so that they can update their database. It's also worth noting that when we audited the facilities, there were some sites that we couldn't access. Sometimes we would contact them on more than one occasion and just would not get a reply. On occasions, we would turn up if we hadn't had a reply to see if we could still gain access. And it was within their rights to say, no, we don't want you to come onto our facilities. That was quite a rare situation, but we did have the odd one. There's also the MOD site at Linstone, which any MOD site is usually really difficult to access. And so we stood no chance of getting onto there. So we've just had to look online to try and gain information that we can from their website. And we will try and contact them to have a verbal conversation about their facilities at some point. So with that database, we also plan to map the facilities in the district, and we use a company called 4Global to do that. And it's quite useful mapping the facilities, because then you have the visual impact of knowing geographically where essentially all the community accessible sports facilities are in the district, and it's quite easier to glance to see where there are gaps geographically in provision. And so we've commissioned that, and we're due to get those maps back in the next couple of days and start including them within the report. The second bit of work we've been doing, and it's quite a big chunk of the front end of the study, is the stakeholder consultation. Now, we did quite a bit of consultation for the SOPG diagnostic report that was undertaken about 6 months ago. And we've revisited that. We've met with some of the same people, some of the same officers, to probably go into more depth on some of the previous discussions we had, just to get a bit more detail than we had previously. But we essentially have been consulting with East Devon officers, LED, schools, sports clubs, national governing bodies of sport, Active Devon, neighbouring local authorities, and organisations that represent particular target groups, whether that's the elderly, disabled, etc., town and parish councils, and a few odds that don't fit into those categories, but it's been quite interesting. Once you start having those conversations, people suggest other people to speak to, and so it's been a bit like peeling an onion. As we've started, the task has grown. The nature of the questions for the consultation varies according to who you're speaking to, but in the round we've been asking about leisure needs, future leisure aspirations, what's good or bad about leisure provision in the district. With neighbouring local authorities, we've been trying to speak to their planning team just to get an understanding of what their current leisure provision is in their district, any future leisure infrastructure plans that they have, any future developments, and any future housing growth in those districts, because all of that will impact on any decisions that East Devon makes going forward over the next 15 to 20 years. So, you know, it'd be no point as building a new leisure centre, for example, if 2 miles across the border, another district council is also planning to do the same. So it's just to get a good understanding of what's going on out there. The third item was community, sports club and school surveys. Again, to gain in-depth insight into leisure needs, it's important that we undertake these surveys. The sports club survey, it's taken quite a while to put together. Initially, we planned to send a survey out to all indoor sports clubs in the district, but as you can imagine, there are some sports that use indoor and outdoor facilities. And a couple of the national governing bodies of sport said, look, we really don't want to be bombarding our sports clubs with more than one survey, because in effect, the planning colleagues in the council will need to undertake a survey for the playing pitch strategy. So what we've done, we've worked with East Devon officers and produced a combined survey to go out to all sports clubs, which should cover off indoor and outdoor sports provision. School surveys, again, we've done a combined one, again, because of playing pitches and indoor sports facilities, again, so that we're not bombarding the schools with more than one survey. So those surveys have gone out. The sports club surveys were sent out via the national governing bodies of sport, because they are unable to share their database with us of sports clubs. And they've been on the whole very supportive and have sent the survey link out to their sports clubs. The closing date for those surveys is around about the 15th of February. So we've got a couple more weeks yet. The community survey, we are still due to send make that go live, and I think the intention is that we'll provide a page on the council website and promote this via the council social media to encourage people to go onto the website page and complete the survey from there. What we find with community surveys is that it always tends to be a bit skewed in terms of the age of the people that fill these surveys in. You know, it's often retired people that have a bit more time on their hand to complete surveys. So what we may try and do, depending on how what the response rate is. We may approach a few schools in the district to see if they will push the survey out to their students to try and get a more representative sample of responses. So the community survey, we are yet to send that out, but we will try and allow a 4-week period so we get a good response rate for that. And finally, I've talked about a supply and demand analysis. So this is, as part of the leisure strategy, we are incorporating what they call a built facility strategy, which is normally a separate document. And this will be attached as an appendices because it's quite a big document and we don't want it to totally take over the strategy itself. We want it to sit as a separate document. And I've started completing this, and it basically assesses each facility type, whether that's a sports hall, swimming pool, and it looks at the quality of the facilities and whether they meet the current demand. And also it looks at the future demand for those facilities. So what I mean by that is we will be looking at potential future population growth in the district in line with your new revised local plan. And we've been working with your planning officers to determine essentially what number of people that will equate to. I appreciate that the local plan is still very much in its infancy at the moment and is still out for consultation with members, but it will give us an indicative idea of the level of future provision that will be needed to cater for that population growth. And we'll also look at the quality of facilities, which is where this is the audit we've been doing to now, and also the accessibility of the facilities and the availability of those facilities, so the hours of availability, etc. So there's quite a bit going on at the moment. It's evidence building, essentially, it's background information gathering, and at some point we'll then go to the front end of the report and start to complete that. And I'll start revisiting all the demographic information that was included in the SOPG diagnostic to see if anything has changed since that was produced. So hopefully all that makes some sort of sense, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
That's great, thank you, Liz. So I've got a handful of questions just to quickly go through. What sort of timetable are we now? Oh, well, I guess no. So my question is, are we still on the same timetable we were at the outset, or has there been delays built in, just COVID, anything? I'm not expecting there to be, it's just a question. Sorry, Liz, I think you're muted.
Sorry, Chair. There have been some delays, partly getting hold of people. It's been quite difficult. Also, we need that community survey feedback before we can start the strategy write-up. The other thing that we'd like to do is that the Sport England do what they call a facility planning model, which they do every year. And we use this when we're doing our supply and demand analysis. And due to COVID, the last facility planning model that was produced for the district, and this is the case across the country, was undertaken in 2020. So the data is probably a year out of date, but it shouldn't essentially matter that much. But they're next doing a facility planning model run in around about May time. So depending on what recommendations we're finding and what the outcome is, we may want to do another facility planning model run just to check whether there's much variation. So I'm probably anticipating, well, I don't want to commit myself, but I would be looking probably end of May, early June time to get this completed.
No, that's great. Thanks. That's not as far back as I was worried you might have said at one point. I might be running a bit too far with one of the examples you gave, where you said about obviously if there's a leisure centre on within, say, like 2 miles of border, you'd have to factor that impact because people don't not pass borders. Just thinking, obviously, Exeter has probably a disproportionate impact on the district compared to other borders. Does that factor in? Just aware that Exeter is obviously doing a lot with leisure centres at the moment, and it's much easier to get to Exeter by public transport than probably villages 2 miles apart in some cases. Does that factor into that on a bigger scale than, say, that 2 mile example you gave?
Yes, so the facility planning model looks specifically at sports halls, swimming pools, indoor bowls, and it looks at all different types of supply and demand. So it looks at exported demand, imported demand. So it'll look at a neighbouring facilities outside the boundaries of East Devon, and it'll basically calculate the proportion of people that will be going out of the borough to undertake their leisure activity, depending on what it is, and those that are coming into the borough from neighbouring authorities. So it'll look at the balance of that. Interestingly, I was speaking with Exeter Head of Planning today, and James Bogue as well, who's dealing with Cranbrook local delivery pilot. So we had that very discussion about their facilities, you know, what they're planning, what their future housing growth is. Interestingly, they haven't got a built facility strategy. They haven't done what you are doing. And so they don't know at the moment whether the new leisure centre they've built in Exeter will meet all their current and future facility requirements. So they're a bit behind the curve on that one. They're assuming it will. They think they've got adequate number of swimming pools in the city to cater for future housing growth, but they almost need to undertake the same exercise that we're doing to establish that and to confirm that. So now they are aware of what you guys are doing, what's happening, and I've talked to them about your local plan. They are aware of much of that because they have regular discussions with the planning officers. So it's just sharing of information, and they do say they have quite a good working relationship with East Devon. So that's positive. So
excellent. No, thank you. I'm sure we can charge them appropriate consultancy rates
yeah.
to get to that point. And then probably a very impossible question to answer right now for maybe Simon and Charlie, but obviously when we get to a point where we've got this future provision, how would we go about, or demand, say, how would we even think about going ahead to meet that? Because I'm sure if we were able to identify tomorrow a new leisure centre was needed, I don't know, somewhere, I'm sure I can think of somewhere, turning that into a reality. How can we actually do that in this day and age of finances, or is this going to end up potentially being a massive white elephant that we can't do anything about?
Sure. If I'll let Simon answer the financial side, he's probably concocting his answer right now. I would hope that the plain pitch strategy, the work that Matt Dickens is doing, which will establish those very specific issues about where there's deficiency in terms of sort of facilities and infrastructure, along with the leisure strategy, will identify clearly, where that demand's going to be. As always, once you've got the evidence base, is then how you then translate that, into the actual infrastructure on the ground. And I'm sure you can speak very personally from your own ward, with Cranbrook about, the timescales or not that, that's coming about. But that's the process. Though I think it's fair to say we did discuss about looking at leisure hubs and how the combination of facilities, swimming pools, sports playing pitches, etc., gym, etc., could serve a wider community need sort of going forward. And that's something that, again, that the leisure strategy will look at, because as it always does, it comes down to money and finance, and I'm sure Simon can answer that.
Nice segue there. Simon?
Thank you, Chair. So strategic leisure, we've worked with many local authorities. They're aware of the constraints on local authority funding as part of the remit in talking through the work that will be done. It is coming together with some recommendations that we can work on together. I'm sure there will be need for investment, but there is understanding what that investment will be and in the right facilities going forward and right provision. And I think it's no secret in terms of the provision we've got at the moment is of an aged stock, aged asset, and doesn't probably fit what LED or strategic leisure would see as the future for leisure provision. And I think it's us just getting a picture of that and how then we might fund the implications of that. But I think, as I said, the overall piece of work does understand the constraints of the finances of any local authority.
Brilliant. Thank you. I'm sure you'll be pleased you don't have to hear from me now, as I'll hand over to Councillor de Sarum, please.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Thank you very much, Chair. Liz, that was a most excellent couple of points that you raised. You talked in your presentation about, you spoke to other local authorities, you looked at their future plans, and I think the Chair touched on Exeter. What did you discover, whether there were any common themes within your investigations? Like, for example, you just said that there was felt, I think it was in Exeter, that there was an adequate number of swimming pools. Do you feel there are sort of some common themes which are emerging from the local authorities that you've had conversations with? Thanks very much, Liz.
I think it's too early to say. We're only partway through the process. Every local authority is different. I mean, in one of the districts, they've got a brand new leisure centre. I think it's the Chard Leisure Centre, or I may be mispronouncing that. And Exeter's got a new leisure facility. So every local authority is in a slightly different position, place. I would like to say, it's almost going back a point to Charlie and Simon. This strategy will hopefully help, and it's often used in this way, help to inform Section 106 funding going forward. So it'll prioritise where future Section 106 funding goes for leisure infrastructure. The other thing I'd like to mention is that we've had situations, and we've got one in Maidstone at the moment, where they've used the built facility strategy, and they've looked at Tunbridge Wells, which is next door, and they've both worked out that they both need new leisure provision. And so they're doing a joint facility, so it's going to be built in Maidstone, but Tunbridge Wells will commute money to help with the capital build of that facility, because it benefits both Tunbridge Wells residents as well as Maidstones. So there's that recognition that so there is an opportunity for cross local authority working to actually joint finance, basically, a new leisure facility. I don't know if that helps or not. Well, that answers your question or not.
That is very positive, because I think it does touch on the finance issues that the Chair raised earlier. Thank you for that.
Thanks. Charlie, I can see your hands up.
Yeah, just going back on Bruce's point, the obvious one that came up with the original plain pitch strategy work, or the one that's been refreshed with Exeter and East Devon. In Exeter, they have significant issues with their all-weather pitches. They don't have enough capacity for a lot of their local football, hockey, I think, teams, and so they end up using the East Devon pitches. But that's that sort of cross-boundary areas that we will need to look at, particularly with where the growth is being planned going forward with new housing in the district. So that would be an obvious one just on the sort of west end of the district. And then there's just, as Simon alluded to, just aging facilities, the growth in terms of, other areas of sport. There's a lot more teams, particularly with encouragement of women's football teams and that sort of proliferation in those areas, which Peter will know about from an LED perspective. So in fact, there's going to be increasing demand, which is great because it's showing we're an active district. And this needs analysis will show that where the shortfalls are. But I'm sure the same issue happening in Exeter, and the real constraints there because of obviously the lack of available space to develop those facilities, as well as the cost, with upgrading facilities.
Thanks, Charlie.
Thanks, Charlie. Councillor Dent, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Liz, for that presentation. During that, you did mention that you had difficulties in approaching the Commando Training Centre at Lymstone. I don't know how relevant this is or how important that is, because clearly that facility will be mostly for the Commando, facility for the family and community. But as the Armed Forces champion for the district, I could have an in there if I could try it, if you need me to. But I'm not sure how relevant it is. I'm willing, if you would like me to, if it's important. If it's a facility that's not generally available to community outside the Royal Marines, then I guess it's not worth it. Just your comment would be appreciated.
Thank you, Councillor. I'd just like to say, I think in reality that there's very little we could probably do to change the arrangements with the MOD site. They have great facilities. I think they've got an 8-court sports hall there. It does say on the Sport England database that it's available for hire by sports clubs and associations, but that's, I imagine normally you have to gain a sponsor to actually gain access onto the site, because everything is very secure and they have to take certain measures for security reasons. But thank you for the offer. I may well take you up on it. I would like to see the facilities, just out of my curiosity more than anything.
I've been there, and I've been in the gym watching all the youngsters being tortured half to death, and seeing them crawl through the mud and everything, and go past on the train and see the assault course that they've got laid out. But I think you're right. I think there may be more security issues than are relevant to your particular survey and to the survey in general. But I just felt it'd be right of me to make that. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, both. I'm sure we can arrange a very interesting day out there with a different spin of leisure. Councillor Miller, please.
Thank you, Chair. I already have a day out planned with Councillor Dent. I'm going within spinning next week, so we could do this as well, maybe. But anyway, so on the community survey that was highlighted in the short presentation, and thanks, Liz, for the presentation. I noted that we were looking at a survey, and it was noted that it would be mainly probably retired people that would end up filling that out due to the fact they have more time on their hands. I definitely agree with the idea that schools would be a good place to go. But I also, looking at some statistics here, that nearly a quarter of people aged between 50 and retirement age do less than 30 minutes of physical activity a week. And it is in midlife where these long-term health problems tend to emerge in people. I just wonder whether Liz had given any thought to the idea of reaching that sort of crucial age group of the working age population, as well as obviously the school children, as mentioned, and the retired, because I think that their views could be really valuable if we're going to use that community survey as an evidence base for the strategy. Has there been any thought, for example, of contacting the major employers within the districts? I don't know how realistic that would be, or just any way of targeting people of sort of that kind of age group, because I think they'd be potentially we could get some really interesting feedback, because obviously people of that age and working age people don't have as much time as school children and retired people to engage in physical activity. So it's often the case that, you know, it's quality rather than quantity. They want to be getting, you know, 1 hour or two of really good quality exercise. So I feel like they're a really important age group and demographic. So thanks, Chair. So any feedback on that I'd be grateful for.
Thank you, Chair. A difficult age group to target, and we did a lot of work in Cornwall, for example, recently, and it's always the same issue. You know, it's the sort of 25 to 50 age group that's difficult to contact. I suppose it depends how many people pick up on the social media, whether through the council social media. I don't know how effective that is in East Devon. The other thought is maybe you going through the schools might be another way to, as well as reaching the students, you're reaching the families of those students. So a lot of schools now have electronic newsletters, and we could try that tact to see whether we could reach more people that way. I'm happy to take whatever approach is necessary. If there are some big employers in East Devon, we've got a way into, you know, passing that survey link through to them for them to share with their employees, and I'm happy to do that. And I'll be a bit reliant on yourselves to provide me with those contacts. I think we'll approach the group, the organisation contacts we have for older people, disabled, you know, all those sort of target groups to see if we can get them to complete the survey as well.
Thanks, Liz. And I think as members, obviously, we've also got contacts with community groups through parish town councils and the like. John, did you want to add comment onto that?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It was about I think about the community survey, because I was wondering how Liz and the team capture what is quite a big industry in our districts. The freelance Pilates keep fit teacher that books the village hall or the church hall, that's not a kind of formally constituted club. Is that picked up through the community survey? Because I think there's quite a kind of sector, a leisure sector in East Devon that kind of follows that route that's not formally constituted club.
Thank you, John. Yes, it is picked up in the survey. So we ask people what's the most frequently used facility, and they basically list the facilities they use and what they use them for, and that can be as it's not necessarily a formal sports centre setting that we're asking them to respond on. It can be a village hall. Interestingly, we approached Active Devon and we shared the draft survey with them because they're very interested in increasing activity within the district, in gathering more evidence about people's leisure habits, where they participate in leisure, whether that's indoors, outdoors, a village hall, a leisure centre. So they really helped in drafting the survey questions. So I'm hoping with the council's permission, we'll be able to share the results of those with Active Devon, because it will certainly help them in the work that they're undertaking.
Great. No, thanks for your time going through that item, Liz. It's really useful. And now we will move on to agenda item 8B, which is LED dashboard for December 2021. I'll hand over to LED. I'm not sure who. If there's anything to add other than to say it is what it is, it's a dashboard.
I think, Chair, is it worth me combining it with, because I think probably if I explain a little bit of the narrative from my report, it might sort of help the dashboard make a little bit of sense, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, I think that's sensible. So yeah, if we'll do it under agenda item 9, help Debbie with the minutes, then the LED facilities and activities December 2021 report, and I'll leave Jamie to do your introduction then, please.
Thanks, Chair. So I won't sort of read the whole report, just trying to give a bit of a summary, if that's okay. I mean, it doesn't make the best reading, to be honest. I think December was, it's traditionally a quieter month anyway, because people, have got better things to do in December than keep fit and healthy, unfortunately. That was then obviously compounded by, Plan B kicking in and having a pretty significant effect across the contract. You can see, particularly if you look at the pavilion, was particularly badly hit. We had a number of colleagues away poorly, both symptomatic and asymptomatic, actually. And I think from the report further down, from Community Leisure UK, you'll see it's was a pretty consistent theme across the country, albeit actually we were doing, in some cases better than some of our counterparts elsewhere across England. So yeah, I think everything was on a decline, really. Disappointingly, we dropped below our own sort of self-imposed target of 8,000 members back in December, only just. But I think probably to look forward now, what I would say is January started very, very positively, and we're back over 8,000. Attendances are on the rise again, and as we hope to see, we've got a lot of new people coming through our doors, as well as some of our old people coming back. And positively, the team have had a good break, because having a lot of the colleagues who have covered for other colleagues over the Christmas period and all of last year managed to get some good time off, which was positive and quite important for the welfare of the team. But as a summary, December was challenging, but January, looking forward, we're moving in a good direction again.
Thanks, Jamie. I feel like you were reading my notes because you've answered some of the questions I was going to raise. But one thing I did want to ask is, you've highlighted obviously the pavilion. It's been difficult, understandably, and there obviously was a historic growth. But I noticed that growth there was just that stop of the growth like 2019. I didn't know if that was. Sorry, I don't fully remember my dates now, but I'm pretty sure all of 2019 was pre-pandemic. And was that just a blip that time, or was that already the beginning of a plateau? / can you not really predict that because the data goes rubbish afterwards?
Oh, I might have to refer to my colleagues because I wasn't around in 2019.
Perhaps if I could just take that. Funnily enough, 2019 was the record year for the pavilion, certainly in financial terms, even if the attendances didn't quite match that. And I think a lot of that was the growth of the cafe as well. So 2019 was actually, I think, the first year we got the pavilion into profit in terms of operation anyway, without taking into account the property costs. So 2018, 2019 were peak years for the pavilion, and it was just starting to really go well and then obviously got hit really hard by the first pandemic in 2020 and hasn't recovered because agents and shows book a year or more in advance. So they all cancelled. The good news is that Jeanette, the manager there, has managed to forward book some of those and pass them on into 2022, 2023. So at the moment, we've got a good programme. If we don't get any more interruptions, we're hoping for a really good year this year.
Great, thank you. Councillor Dent, please.
Sorry to be so persistent. Two things. One, I'd just like to ask Jamie where he really feels we're standing on memberships, because they're the sort of core bit. That's one. And two, funnily enough, I was looking at the pavilion's entertainment programme for the remainder of the year, and I have to tell you, it looks very encouraging. Lots of things I'd like to go to, and even my wife might like to go to. So that's good news, and I hope that builds up. But I am interested in terms of the exercise classes, memberships, and how that really is doing now, please.
Thanks. Jamie, you right, sir?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I think last year was a bit of a stop-start with membership. It was relatively flat. We saw a small peak in September, October, as we'd normally expect to see, and then it drops off November, December. And we actually looked back recently at the last 4 years, and the profile has been pretty consistent when you take away sort of that weird pandemic in the middle. I'm not sure you can call it that. But when you look at a consistent year, 18 and 19 profile, we're relatively consistent. We did a bit of work at the start of last year with our pricing strategy and created some different membership options, that has helped, and certainly as we go into this year, we will be looking at that again with a view to returning. I think we're at 78%. We finished the year of our pre-pandemic level, and there's a real drive to move that on again now. And say that's been a very consistent. Having been speaking to colleagues across the country in similar organisations to ours, have seen a very similar trend, and I say likewise the independent report for Community Leisure UK, pretty much mirrors that trend. But we are slowly starting to move in the right direction, and people are starting to come back. Our customer advocacy through our Net Promoter Score, it remains consistently good. Can always be better, and we learn from everyone we get, and we use that data to try and improve.
Thanks, Jamie. You've obviously mentioned profile. I was just thinking, so I've always assumed, rightly or wrongly, that January more people sign up for gym memberships. Had you seen that same level of uplift this January, bearing in mind obviously Plan B, Omicron doesn't, or has it been more reduced or more higher because people are wanting to get back?
January is going really well. I mean, traditionally January always will. The challenge is keeping them March, April, May. As the profile, people tend to join in January because it's New Year, May because they're getting ready for the summer, September because the kids have gone back to school, and that tends to be the profile. And this is where the challenge and Councillor Dent will know of making sure we've got the right programmes, the right descriptions, the right activities to keep people there, and we're looking after them when they come. And that's the difference between us and some of our, or private operators, shall we say. It's our team that will look after them. But no, January is going really well. We're ahead of target as we sit today, and we challenge the team to get to a point, by month end, which is next Monday night.
That sounds really positive. Councillor Saran, please.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I hope I haven't jumped into it tonight. I wanted to talk about page 11, the community, the walking for health. Jamie, you said in your report, this is requiring lots of work with the new systems, marketing and training. Can you sort of describe why this has happened, and how are you overcoming it, so that it will sort of bed down? If you could perhaps elaborate a bit more on that, I'd be most appreciative. Thank you.
So this is, I think, where it's changed last year, and there were different. So we're not so much a new provider, where we were working with Devon County, and so it's basically a new program, and it's just, I think with anything, we've got new people, new organisations. So the Ramblers are now involved as part of that organisation, and so it's just working, different ways of working, and we're trying to pull that together. And I think it launched literally 3 days ago, I believe. So it's still very much in its infancy, and it's just new people, and what was there before, was working well. It was settled, and everybody knew what they were doing, and that's what that means, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, that's very helpful. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And Councillor Arnott, please.
Thank you, Chair. I apologise in advance if this sounds a little bit negative, but I just need to try and understand the Exmouth Pavilion a little bit more. So, like Councillor Dent, I look forward to which of the heavy rock tribute acts he's going to take his wife to at the Exmouth Pavilion, I must say. But I have looked at the programme, and to be honest with you, the programme at the Pavilion is probably 80% tribute acts. That's what it is. So I'm not. That's, if people pay to go and see that, that's what people, we can't sort of sit in snobbish judgment on that. But I do think we're getting to the point now where we're having to put aside significant capital allocations just to keep the place open, where I would really be grateful, Chair, if we can get to the point at the next meeting where we have a simple balance sheet that we can understand from Simon or Peter or whoever, which is effectively includes the operational costs of the Exmouth Pavilion, but also what it's actually costing us in capital terms as well. Because I think without that, we're going on with our fingers crossed a little bit, and effectively what we're doing, and this is paradoxical coming from me, many of you know, sort of arty-farty is the next person, and all in favour of subsidy where it's appropriate, but we are a district council with financial challenges that is subsidising a venue which is itself in its own structural terms struggling. And so, Chair, I'm wondering how we can get just to a little bit more clarity on that, on what the real position is with the Exmouth Pavilion. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just thinking out loud slightly, so anyone feel free to tell me to shut up at any point. We've got Tim Childs doing a report on cap assets next meeting, and I'm just wondering actually if this isn't, I don't think, going to be part of that report, but whether we could have a separate report on the pavilion, and maybe with some figures that are crudely looked at through, as you suggest, the cooperation of Simon and Peter, just to try and look underneath the bonnet. Obviously happy for it to be part B if that's where it needs to sit, depending on how open and those figures are. I can see some nods and not too much glaring. So if we're happy to just leave that out there, that will just be an item coming forward on the next agenda. I think we'll do that, and then I will hand over to Councillor Miller, please.
Yeah, I agree with, thanks, Chair. I agree completely with what Councillor Arnott said. I thought at the last meeting that we'd resolved to get a report on a specific report on the pavilion for Part B. It might be, my memory might fail me here, but I'm pretty sure that there was a resolution. And I think what we need is exactly what Councillor Arnott said, because what I think we need to do is establish some kind of long-term strategy for the pavilion. We've heard before that the pavilion could, or we think there is potential for 1,000 capacity at the pavilion, and if that is a long-term goal for us, that's going to attract the kind of acts which economically will be brilliant for the area, culturally brilliant for the area, financially good for this district. We should be looking into that, because obviously the figures that the council have been presented with in terms of maintenance costs of the pavilion as it stands are very high, and it might be the case that we wish to look at something more long term. We might wish to borrow from the Treasury on a long term basis, as I think has been done in the past with the Exmouth Leisure Centre, which went from a facility which was, rather, not to be unkind, but was tired, and the pavilion in some ways, it is in my view, and others might disagree, I think it's a fantastic facility, but I think the building as it stands at the moment is rather tired. I think the toilets are in a tired state, and I think it doesn't just need money on the maintaining it and bringing it up to health and safety levels. We need to consider the long term, what we want the pavilion to be and what its potential is. So I welcome this report, and it would be really good if we can have it at the next meeting in March in the Part B if need be, but I just hope we get it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, I've just refreshed my mind on the minutes of the last meeting, and I see on the item we did request a report detailing options in the future. So I think I will leave Debbie to chase officers and LED to progress that for the next meeting. And I think now is a good time to move forward to agenda item 10. It's the England COVID impact report, which I think is something LED just wanted to share with us as members for a bit of background. So I'll leave anyone from LED if they want to introduce it, or open up to members if they want to make any comments on that report. On that basis, I think I'm sure everyone's taken in the report, and I think we're in a position to move to private session. So that brings the public part of our consultation meeting to an end. However, can I just remind all those present that the supporting officer will confirm when the meeting is no longer being recorded or going live, and until then your comments will be live to the public. Thank you.